Lovely to have Annu Jalais with us this evening. Those who are with Soroptimist, they have heard her previously, and she spoke so beautifully about the Sunderbans and the Bon Bibi. And ever since then, I said, Annu, you must come over to If You Are webinar. That is one great thing we have today. And the other is we have the new club members of Bhubaneswar joining this webinar. So greetings to the president and members of Bhubaneswar. Happy to have you with us. We are sure to see them at the next CC. Now, Annu has done extensive work in this area. And as she takes you through the slides, you will be able to understand the exact nuances that she has undergone with this very specific area of West Bengal, the Sunderbans, and what she has seen with the status of women there. Over to you, Annu.
Thank you so much.
Puravi, will you just do a brief introduction, biodata of Annu?
Sure. 1 minute. I'll just introduce Dr. Annu Jalais to you. Dr. Annu Jalais is an associate professor at the Kriya University in Andhra Pradesh in Sri City and an adjunct fellow with Dakshin Foundation at Bangalore. Kindly mute yourselves, please. She is an environmental anthropologist by profession and works on the human-animal interface, environmental justice, religious identity, gender, caste, and migration. Her primary focus is on South Asia, specifically Bangladesh and India. I will have to mute you because I'm hearing a lot of noise. 1 second, guys. 1 second, please. Somebody has to.
There is some sound going on at the back. Please mute yourselves.
Sorry, Akshat's iPhone, yeah.
Okay, kindly mute yourself. Okay. So let me just go over this last sentence again. Her primary focus is on South Asia, specifically Bangladesh and India. Her zone of interest encompasses Southeast Asia and China, especially around Indian Ocean exchanges in the religious, cultural, and environmental realms. She has authored Forest of Tigers, People, Politics, and Environment in the Sunderbans, which was published in 210, and co-authored the Bengal Diaspora in 2016. By her own admission, she is deeply committed to making her academic work more relevant and therefore works with individuals and organizations committed to social justice and change. Over to you, Dr. Annu Jalais.
Thank you so much for this introduction. And thank you so much for this invitation, Ranjanadi. I'm very happy to be speaking to all of you today. I've looked up your website. You seem to be an amazing group of women. And I haven't changed much my PowerPoint presentation from last time because Ranjanadi said that she had liked it as it was and that she had wanted me to present the same thing. So I apologize if some of you were in the other talk. So good afternoon, everyone. I will be sharing my screen. And so, yeah. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So I've been going to the Sundarban. I've been going there since I was a child, but I have been working on the Sundarban for the last 25 years. I went there as a young PhD student and in 1999. And since then, I've returned at least once a year, except during COVID time. And I've kept in touch. Recently, I even had the woman in whose house I lived for 2 years when I was there, to come and visit me in Chennai for a couple of weeks. So I took her to Mahabalipuram and Pondicherry and showed her around Chennai. So basically, I'm very much, still in touch with all of the women with whom I worked with 25 years ago. And since then, I have been working on the Sundarban and on how things have changed, in the last 25 years. So I shall take you through a little bit through what I have done and, how I basically, I thought that it would be good to talk a little bit about people's devotion to Ma Bono Bibi and then Ma Kali and how they spoke about the two. And my latest projects, which have been with women also, and which have been sort of more collaborative. So I'm going to talk about that also in the end. It also involves the Sundarban and Sundarban women. So I, like most kids growing up in Bengal, you hear about the Sundarban, you read stories about the Sundarban. I grew up in Shalkia, and I had a neighbor who actually was a fisherman who used to go to the Sundarban. So through him and through my parents who used to work in this organization called Seva Sangha Samiti, I used to go to the Sundarban, hear about the Sundarban, and when I was in class 8, I went there with my school, Loito Shialda, and I was very interested. It was in the late 80s, and it was all about, scientists trying to find why Sundarban tigers were man-eaters. And it seemed to be the only species who were man-eaters. We've heard Jim Corbett's stories and how tigers don't really attack humans until they're old or impaired. But here, these were young tigers swimming over and taking people off boats, of villages. So it was very interesting for scientists to sort of, question the reasons why this tiger might have been a man-eater. And already, in 1666, perhaps the first account of Sundarban tiger by this Frenchman called François Bernier, he says that in the Sundarban, the tigers are ferocious and they always go for the stoutest person in the group. And he said that he was quite scared because he was the stoutest in the group. And so basically, there is a long tradition of these tigers having been man-eaters. And initially, when I went there, I wasn't really interested in tigers so much because I was a student in cultural and social anthropology, and I was more interested in finding out about people's lives, histories, how they lived there. And it was only because they kept telling me, you won't be able to write about our lives if you haven't, if you don't know anything about our tigers. And this is why I got interested in, in the topic. And, so I thought it was going to be a story of them telling me how terrible it was to be living in this place which had man-eating tigers and how they hated tigers. And then I was surprised to see that they actually spoke of it with a lot of emotion. And they said that tigers were in some sort brothers, that tigers were actually deeply compassionate animals, even though they were cantankerous and even though they killed people, they were actually deeply, compassionate and caring. And they had this very strange story about tigers having trekked all the way from Southeast Asia, arriving in the Sundarban. And they said, they were kicked out of Southeast Asia because everybody wanted to hunt them for their fur, their teeth, their various body parts. And they came to this godforsaken place of the Sundarban, and people left them alone. And so when we came as refugees from East Bengal, the tigers left us alone because they know what it means to be a migrant, because these tigers are migrants. So it was a very interesting story, which has very little scientific basis, but which was a story that sort of told me that they had an impression of these creatures that was different from the way I had grown up thinking about wild animals. And this is why in my work, I started to call tigers non-humans. Because in a way, if I said animal, it doesn't give the same meaning as a non-human, you know? A sort of creature that is there that is not necessarily inferior, but that is different. And so this is why I got very interested in, you know, why do you say that the tiger is compassionate? How can a tiger be compassionate? And so I spent a lot of time with tiger charmers and with other people who went to the forest, a lot of them women, and what they had to say about, you know, living with these creatures. So it also brought me academically, intellectually to think with this notion of the non-human. What does it mean, you know? In most parts of the world, there has been fixed categories between humans and non-humans. You know, Descartes' famous phrase, I think, therefore I am, and therefore excluding the animal world, you know, means that we humans are somehow superior. If you look at Chinese philosophy, it is full of this idea that we are superior to, humans are superior to animals. There is a saying, you know, Lao Tzu came back after a big fire, and the man who writes about this episode said, the master asked if any humans had been killed in the fire. He did not ask about the horses. And also the Chinese have given a lot of barbarian names, you know, to outsiders, and a lot of these names are animal names. So, so I was curious, you know, because also growing up in Kolkata, I also grew up with, you know, animals are dirty and outside, and you know they are not, and it was only when I came to the Sunderbans that I saw that there was a very strange way of talking about tigers and even cows and goats and chicken. And, you know, this guy had even adopted a chicken from the forest and said that she lived in his compound and that he let her free. And I have you know, 2 hours of recording of him talking about his chicken. So it was very interesting for me to see that it was a connection that was one that was considered to be, you know, on the same plane as another human. They were not necessarily seeing them as inferior. And this reminded me of a French philosopher, anthropologist called Philippe Descola, who had just brought out his book. He had come to the London School of Economics, where I was doing my PhD, and he had spoken about the Amazon and how there people thought that they could become jaguars and jaguars could become human. And they had these long lists of what jaguars did, you know, when they were human, how they were human, and how people could become. And when I was speaking to the tiger charmers, it felt that it was the same. You know, they kept talking about how the tiger appears to them in dream, how they can talk to the tigers and they can control them. So it was for me very interesting to see that, you know, in some way, these people shared a deep connection with their environment and non-humans, which looked very much like what a lot of communities in the Amazon shared. And so it was closer to what was happening in the Amazon than what was happening in Kolkata, you know. So anyway, so because I told people very often, you know, I said, you know, I'm from Kolkata. I've seen tigers in zoos. And they said, no, you don't know anything about tigers. That's not a tiger. That's something else, you know. Our tigers are totally different. So this is why I got curious to know more. So the Sundarban, and I don't think I have to spend much time explaining the place to you. Even though a lot of you will have gone to Shojne Khali, and now there are many guest houses and hotels around the place, but actually each and every inhabited island of the Sundarban is surrounded by a big mud wall. And you can see an example here on the photo. This was taken in Bangladesh, but in West Bengal, it's the same. And so what happens, you know, when often you hear that the cyclone, you know, whether it's Amphan or Aila or, you know, any big cyclones of the last few years, every time they cause tremendous losses to the people in the area, it is often because one of these mud walls has been breached. And so when the mud wall is breached by the strong winds and by the high tide, because you have to know that the water in these rivers, especially in the southernmost islands, is very, very brackish. It's salty because it's deep water. And so, Rajalakshmi, you will have to put your, it would be good if you could put yourself on mute because we can hear you. Okay. I will try. I don't know if I can put this person on mute. No, I can't. Purobi, maybe you might be able to. Sorry. So,
I'll do it.
yeah. So basically,
will the rest of you mute yourself?
I'll do it. Ranjana, let her continue. I'll do it.
I think as the what to say, the organizer or whatever, you can mute everybody except
Yeah, I'm
me.
doing that. I can't mute everybody, but then you will also get muted. I'll do it. You carry on. Carry on.
Okay. So basically these mud walls get breached, and what happens is that the ponds, around houses, every house usually has a pond for fish and for drinking water purposes. That pond gets contaminated with salt water, and therefore the fish die, and that water is, undrinkable. So very often people need fresh water, packets of water and food when this happens. So it's a region which hasn't been much developed. There is electricity now, but it came only about 10 years back. And it's also not, you don't have electricity constantly. And in some places you don't have, network very easily. So anyway, so this is the lay of the land. So a lot of people, and this is Canning before the bridge was built. So there are two big bridges that have been built in the last decade. One is in Canning and one is in Bashanti. Otherwise, you had to walk, to get to the train. So this was in Canning. A lot of people have been working as migrants outside the Sundarban. This is more recent. And previously, people would turn to the forest. They still do, actually, to get honey, crab, fish, even wood, usually tinder wood. But so this whole story of tigers being, even though cantankerous, also compassionate, was a story that basically has its roots in the Bon Bibi Johuranama, which is the booklet that is read out in honor of Ma Bono Bibi. And she is worshipped around mid-January and sometimes in mid-February. So, and it's a very strange book that is written in Bangla. So, and Bangla is written like in English from left to right, but the book starts from what we would consider the end to emulate Arabic. So the book starts from the back, and you still read it from left to right. And in the story, it is about one sage, one rishi, suddenly deciding to get greedy and becoming a Brahman man-eating tiger. And Allah, in his compassion, decides to send this young woman who has been abandoned by her mother and raised by a deer in a forest to go and teach this crazy rishi, because suddenly this rishi wanted to eat human flesh, to tell this rishi to stop killing so many people. And so she goes to the land of the 18 tides. And what she does is, it's a long story, but she basically eventually brings about a truce between a little human boy and Dokhin Rai, this tiger. And she says that because the tiger eventually calls her mother and asks for her forgiveness. And she says, if I'm going to be your mother, then you have to accept the human as your brother, because he is also my son. He's also called me to be his mother and to protect him from you. So now you are brothers, and now you owe responsibility towards each other. So no human can go into the forest if they have, if they are greedy or selfish. So basically, the injunction is to get into the forest with pure hands and empty hearts. So no firearms, no food on the boat. You have to have eaten everything. No, no. No other jobs. If you have an NGO or if you work as a school teacher, you cannot go to the forest to get fish or crab or wood, because if you do, you will be killed. So there's a whole long list of what you can do and cannot do. And similarly for the tiger. So the tiger is not allowed to kill anybody who comes under the protection of Ma Bon Bibi saying, I have nothing. But if you come and you have things, then you can be killed. And it was very funny because, well, not funny, strange. 3 years ago, somebody I knew quite closely, Arjun Mondol, he was about my age, and he went to the Sunderbans. He worked as an NGO worker, and his daughter was going to get married, and he thought that he should go and make some money quickly. So he went to the forest and he got killed by a tiger. And I arrived a few days after he was killed, and everybody told me the same thing, saying, why did Arjun have to go? Arjun had an NGO job. He had money. Why did he have to go? So, it felt very strange to see that idea was, in 2021, still something that all the islanders believed in, that you do not go to the forest. If you can depend on your land, if you have a job, if you have some other source of income, you cannot go there. You only go there if you have nothing left. And so it's interesting. I'm not saying that there are no poachers and all of that, but then the poachers, and I've met a couple, they say that they don't worship Ma Bono Bibi, they worship Ma Kali. Okay, so it's a different understanding of of this realm, which is fascinating. And also it's fascinating that this deity, quote unquote, I like to call her superpower and not deity, because deity excludes Christians or Muslims who venerate her. And I don't say worship, I say venerate, because this is how people in Bangladesh and some Muslims in West Bengal explained it to me. They say, the same way we venerate the tombs of Sufi peers, the same way we venerate our parents and we show respect, in the same way we venerate Ma Bono Bibi. We don't worship her, but we venerate her, we show respect. So I found that very interesting. So it's this very interesting story that is not very old. It's about, a little more than 200 years old. Written by a Muslim person, Muhammad Khater or Abdur Rahim. It depends on which source you're citing. And so this story is a story about looking out for the other. It's about not being greedy, not being selfish, sharing. And so a lot of the women who went there, kept telling me. So there was an argument 25 years ago when I came between, one man saying, and he wasn't going to the forest, but he said, oh, the forest now, tigers attack because a lot of women are going into the forest. And this tiger charmer said, what rubbish. It's not about women going into the forest. It's about you guys not respecting the forest. Women can go to the forest. And he was an extraordinary person, this tiger charmer. I've recently made a film on him and on the woman in whose house I lived and on the Sundarban. And I'm hoping that within a month it can be screened. It's just 25 minutes long, but you might be interested in watching it. So it's this, so what was also interesting was that when you went to the forest, let's say 3 people go to the forest on a small boat, they shared everything equally into 4. 1 portion for the boat or the person who allowed them to take his boat. He may or may not be on that boat, and 3 other people. Even if there is a very elderly person, or even if there is a very young 15-year-old who doesn't know much, he will get an equal amount. So when I went to the forest a couple of times with the lady in whose house I lived and 2-3 other people, they also gave me a portion, because whatever you get from the forest, you have to share equally. And when you are bringing it back to your house, if somebody says, oh, what a beautiful fish, or what a nice piece of wood, or whatever, you have to give that piece of fish, or that piece of wood to that person. Because you cannot really make money from them, and you cannot have the evil eye strike those things. You have to then give it away. So people sell whatever they get from the forest. The whole idea is to share, and you try and barter those items, or you sell them for very little. And you basically, and that is very, very different from a new kind of occupation that has come about in the last 30, 40 years, which is prawn seed collection. So when you are doing prawn seed collection, you are going into, you are walking along the banks of rivers individually, often as a woman. Okay, women do that. And then they say it is an individual job where it all depends on luck. How many pieces of, how many prawn seedlings I get. Because then they sell each piece, right, to somebody who will then put them in a gher and grow these shrimps. So they said that it is such a lottery that, and it is not something where we need anybody's cooperation or we need to share. So we don't worship Ma Bono Bibi. We worship Ma Kali, because Ma Kali is a lot more powerful for us, because we are doing individual jobs. And it was for me very interesting to see that these women who were collecting these prawn seedlings thought that, the deity they should worship is Ma Kali and not Ma Bono Bibi. Whereas when they went to the forest, then it was Ma Bono Bibi. And usually they tried, the same woman didn't do both. She would decide whether she wanted to stay in the, do the forest work or do the prawn collection, the prawn seedling collection. So these are some images of, the forest that I took many, many years ago. So this is why they're not the best. So this tiny little net is called a jalti, with which you pick the crabs, and crabs are caught by putting a long, long string, and along the string you attach pieces of frog meat or pieces of shark meat, and you put it inside along the banks. And so the crabs, they come and, try to eat that piece. And then slowly you raise that long string, and at the end, you see the crabs hanging. So, and then with a small net called the jalti, you pick up the crabs. So these are, and of course, you can see the kinds of pneumatophoric roots and all of that, and how people, are drying their nets along the banks of the river. The tiger may appear anytime. It's very frightening. And these, on the top left, you can see women collecting shrimp and then selling them to people, so they count each shrimp. And the ones on boats are usually men. And again, with mosquito nets, basically, they're collecting these tiny shrimp seedlings. And a lot of women get attacked by crocodiles or even sometimes sharks. So again, it's very dangerous. And you have to remember when you get into the forest. So you see, this is, for example, high tide, which is why you don't see the forest land at the bottom, where the boat is. And you have to be very careful to get the boat out into a bigger river by the time the tide goes down, because otherwise you get stuck on forest land for 12 hours until the next tide, basically. So this is what I was telling you. Ma Bono Bibi brings a kind of truce between humans and tigers, and they feel that they are in some sort of complicity. That basically she wants the forest to be enjoyed by both tigers and humans, and she wants the two of them to be like brothers and responsible towards each other. So yeah, anyway, there's a long story with her brother Shahjongoli, the Gaji, and all of that. I won't go into it. This is an image in Bangladesh where people were taking images of Ma Bon Bibi to a shrine and to worship her. This was in West Bengal. So in West Bengal, she's getting more and more, she looks more and more like Ma Lokhi, you know, even in the 25 years that I can see. So she's very beautifully made by, here it's Shuranjan who makes it and who makes all these images. And there's little Dukhe that she protects. And so yeah, so the bottom left picture is in West Bengal and the two other pictures are in Bangladesh. So and the whole, so in Bangladesh, one of these was in the forest, inside the forest. The shrine was in the forest, and Ma Bono Bibi is completely vegetarian. She is offered fruits and flowers and also little live chicks. So basically people release live chicks in front on her altar, and basically the live chicks go and you know, they grow into chicken in the forest. And they often tell me, you know, those chicken are some of the live chicks we gave the goddess a few years ago. So I found that very interesting, you know, how she is worshipped. So this is one of the shrines of Ma Bono Bibi that I found in Bangladesh. I have other images where it's just a shrine with these earthen mounds inside. And this is her Bon Bibi, you know, the Bon Bibi Johoranama book, which is read, as I was telling you. And there's a lot of stories actually of peers controlling tigers in Bengal's history. So this got me interested in getting to know more about the peer-tiger connection, you know, and I got interested also in a lot of paintings from Dunhuang from the 12th, 13th centuries. And these paintings show men with tigers. And most Chinese art historians have said that these are Buddhist men with tigers, but they don't look like Buddhist monks. They have a big bag. They have, you know, their clothes are quite nice and beautiful. And so I've been wondering and trying to write about these men with tigers and what they might mean, you know, and whether there is some connection to Bengal or Southeast Asia, which is also full of Sufi saints with tigers. So it's a long history that spans across Asia that I'm interested in. And this is also what got me interested in how the Chinese view non-humans. Because if in India, we have avatars and, you know, we can be reborn as non-humans, and gods and goddesses have, you know, avatars that are take the form of non-humans. In China, 1,000 years ago, they exterminated elephants and tigers, saying that these were vermin and that, you know, agriculture was the most important thing. So we know about the killing of sparrows under Mao, but actually even long before that, you know, there has been sort of a taming and a killing of the wild, which you don't find in South Asia, right? You find all kinds of wild animals across South Asia. So this is what got me interested, you know. More recently, this is my work. And so this is an image I have, I took in Bangladesh. And I got interested in, you know, because people say this is a Hindu tradition. And what I found was that actually there are a whole lot of shrines, mazars, you know, both in West Bengal, in Bhutiari Sharif, for example, and in other parts, as well as in Bangladesh, where a lot of these mazars have special creatures linked to them. So here, for example, it's Baijit Bostami's mazar in Chittagong. Sorry. So these this mazar has a few soft-shelled turtles that have disappeared from the wild, and they have the wild has been repopulated in the last decade through the use of these turtles. They've asked the khadims of these places if they could take some of these turtles to repopulate the wild. And so people come and feed these turtles and basically get their blessings, by touching their forehead. And they've been living like this for, I don't know how many centuries. So this is something that is not just within Hindu or Buddhist or Jain tradition. It's also within Islam in South Asia. You have a lot of, respect of non-humans and, stories around them. For example, around Muharram time, you have a horse and people feed it all kinds of food, try to walk under it. And basically, there's always a Quran put on top of the horse so that it is not considered sacrilegious or sinful, but that, people are showing the Quran respect, but there is a horse involved. So this is, so I've been interested in how basically animals figure in different religions within South Asia. So as I was telling you, Ma Kali has been the deity that a lot of these women who collect prawn seedlings now worship. They prefer her. They told me that she is the goddess chosen by dacoits, taxi drivers, and bus drivers, and she is very ferocious, and only she can save us from crocodiles and sharks. So this is also a new deity, over the last 20 years only that they have started worshipping her, those women who collect prawn seedlings. So I found that very interesting. So after Forest of Tigers, I went to, I lived in Bangladesh for a couple of years, and I wrote this book with Joya Chatterjee, a famous historian from Trinity College in Cambridge, and Claire Alexander, who is now at the University of Manchester. So all three of us were at the London School of Economics when we started this project, and we got some grant money for it. And so I was the anthropologist working in Bangladesh, and we were looking at the effects of partition on Bengali Muslims from West Bengal and Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. And I tried to find all those people who had come from India to settle in East Pakistan. So we grow up hearing all the stories of Hindus who left East Pakistan to come to India. But about 1/4 of the people who moved frontiers in the 60s, 50s were Muslims who left West Bengal and Bihar to go to East Pakistan. So we were interested in this work, and this is what I did with them. So, since COVID and all of that, I've really been thinking, what does it mean to be living with non-humans? How will we be living with increasingly strong cyclones, with droughts, with floods, with, all kinds of insects eating up crops. And this is why I've been teaching on the Anthropocene and reading up a lot on, what it means to be living in a world which we cannot predict anymore. And what is our relationship with non-humans got to do with this new world, To what extent do we continue to consider them as just food, or domesticated creatures? To what extent do we not learn from people who have coexisted and cohabited with them and, have had them as food, but also have had them as sacrificial creatures or creatures that are important and all of that. So these are what I've been interested in. Yes, as I was telling you, because of COVID and the various illnesses caused by zoonoses, and very often it's because forests have been cut down, whether it's the Nipah in Kerala that is coming up or COVID, it's very often when wild animals lose their habitat and basically come too close to humans that we start getting all kinds of diseases. So this is some of the work I'm interested in. I'm looking also at mental health in the Sunderbans, how these cyclones it might be affecting women and their, especially women actually, and their mental health. So these are some of the latest projects that I've been working on, building a Southern collective with some friends of mine from the Dakshin Foundation, and uh, basically how to think of the non-human. This is what I've been building an Asian bestiary, asking my students to choose one symbolic animal and what it means in their culture, So whether it's in their Gond culture, in Bengali culture, in whatever culture, they need to talk about one animal that has a lot of symbolism. Because a lot of the time, this reveals more about us humans as a group, as a culture, than it does about the animal itself, right? The way in which we talk about these creatures says a lot about who we are. So I also organized a Zoom with some artists, with a Singaporean artist called Hotsu Nien and a Pakistani artist called Naiza Khan. She worked on the whale, he worked on the tiger, and it was absolutely fascinating to see how they, how they were talking about these non-humans and what it meant. And so this was during COVID also. So we did it on Zoom, and we, got to think about these themes. So I'd like to finish my talk here. I wanted to leave some time for you to ask me questions. I can talk to you about, more recent developments around women. And this was very recently, 6 months ago, when I was in the Sunderbans and I was talking to Leela. One of the things she said was that আজকাল বিয়ের জন্য মেয়ে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না, বউও পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না. So I was like, what do so these days you can't find young girls to marry our sons, and you can't find married women too. And I said, what do you mean? So she said, previously we could find women who were separated from their husbands or divorced, and some men were happy with, marrying them. But these days we can't find either. And so there was a long conversation between her and me on why is that? And she said, they prefer working in Kolkata as domestic laborers, as these days, as physiotherapists, as all kind, and they make their own money, they help their parents, they help their family, and they feel that if they're married, very often they're made to work much harder, but they don't get any money of their own, and they can't help their families. So this was a new change that I was seeing, that I was very interested in, and at some point I'd like to write about it. Also, the ease with which women, it's no longer a stigma to not get married, which it was, 20 years ago. But these days, a lot of young women are saying, no, I prefer helping my parents, or I prefer doing something for my family. So I found that very interesting. So I shall stop now. And over the next, 20 minutes, I'm happy to take questions from all of you.
Annu, that was such a wonderful listening to your thing. And I was just wondering that, of course, whatever research you've done, that's that in-depth research, and of course, I've heard you before. But I was just thinking that even in this 21st century, how much of the socio-cultural background has entered into our lives in different perspectives? Our culture pattern, our religion, our belief have all got tied up with our occupation and our livelihood.
Totally. So this is what for me fascinates me, right? 25 years ago, most people were worshippers of Ma Bono Bibi. They did say already, some of them said, এটা মোল্লাদের ঠাকুর, আমরা পুজো দিচ্ছি কেন, আমরা হিন্দু মানে এই বোন বিবি পুজো দিচ্ছি কেন? But then Bon Bibi became hip and famous, right? With Amitav Ghosh's Hungry Tide, with Mamata Banerjee organizing a whole lot of festivals around Bono Bibi. There are melas and all of that. So she's become hip, and a lot of people, so it's a different, it's a lot of people now don't have any problem. In the film that I made, this man was, that I made with Joy Banerjee. This man kept, the Shuranjan who makes these images said that, Bon Bibi is actually another name for Lokhi. And he said the Gaji is actually sheep, and Shah Janguli is actually Vishnu. So he had basically figured it out in his head and completely Hinduized her, even though her book says that she was sent by Allah, you know. So it was very interesting for me to hear that. And he said, you know, এটা এক লীলা, এটা আমাদের ভগবানের এক লীলা, সবকিছু বোঝা যায় না। And I again found that so beautiful, you know, the ease with which people accept these things. But that is not for everybody. No, a lot of people also have trouble in today's day and age that, you know, with the kind of politics that we are, you know, very often fed in a way, it becomes difficult to be very open-minded people, whether we come from the Sunderbans or from Kolkata. And also a lot of people now work in Kolkata and elsewhere. So, you know, they sort of feel that perhaps this is not the right thing we're doing. You know, in Bangladesh also a lot of people said, yes, Bono Bibi used to be venerated by my father. On her day today, we put some flowers and some batasha, but we don't do anything. We just light a pradeep, batasha, flowers on the 15th of January. The rest of the time, on Fridays also very often, because it's on Fridays that you do her puja. We worship her, but, you know, venerate her, but the rest of the time we don't. So there is a certain unease, but all over Bengal, amongst all communities, over rituals and deities that, you know, that cannot be pinned down to one religion. And this is something that, you know, is getting lost. And to what extent we lose out also on an opening towards the other with, you know, rites and rituals becoming more and more orthodox is what I'm wondering. So, you know, and as you, Ranjanadi, as you were saying, you know, to what extent these cultural patterns affect us, to what extent, you know, people are putting them aside. So this is why I ended this talk with how a lot of young women are thinking today, you know, and saying, do I get married and get tied down to a family where the mother-in-law and father-in-law will expect me to do all the cooking and the cleaning of the house and the feeding of the various family members while my husband is in Chennai working. And very often, you know, in rural Bengal, you marry a son when you need somebody to work around the house, when things become very difficult, you know. So they know this, right? They know how it is. And they're like, why should I even get married? I can make my own money. I can do other things with my life. And you know, this is a huge step for a lot of Bengali women. And I found that very interesting, that they should question, you know, some of the cultural norms with which they've grown up, to say, you know what, I'm not getting married, or at least not now. And so, or some women I've heard have left their children with their in-laws and have gone off to Kolkata to make ends meet, because some of them are, you know, beaten up by their in-laws or by their husbands, or the husband doesn't send back any money. The husband has run away with another woman, you know, in some other city. So and these women are very resourceful. They make their own lives. They've always depended on themselves. Even 25 years ago, you know, very often they were the ones, you know, rearing chicken and working in the fields and selling things and basically running households. So it's not this very bhodro idea of, you know, a woman shouldn't be working, and it's a very different, you know, it's a different way they have of existing, where they think that they should be self-reliant. So.
Members, put in your questions if you have any. I think Uma has a question with primary education and health. Annu, if you could just address that.
And we could stop the presentation so that we can see everyone. We can stop the presentation.
Okay, yeah. Let's do that.
Yes, stop the presentation. Correct.
Okay. So is it better now? Can you see everyone?
Yes.
Yes. So what you know, the fact that there are 2 new bridges have caused a lot of problem in the villages in the field of education. Because previously, the school teachers would stay in the village and they would only retire, and they would not retire in the village. They all of them, all the school teachers that I knew when I was in there, had all bought a plot of land in either Goria or Mollikpur or Sonarpur, and planned on retiring there as soon as they finished their jobs as school teachers. So this is something that I had already found very interesting. But you know, a lot of islanders used to go to these school teachers and say, you know, I received this letter. Can you read it out? Or I bought this machine and it's not working and I can get insurance, but I need to write to this company. Can you help me write this letter? So the school teachers would be solicited to help islanders, you know, in many things. Now, because the transport system is so much better, in islands like Patankhali, and I went to the University of Patankhali where I gave a talk a couple of years back. The university teachers do not stay there, neither do the school teachers. They go back home every day on motorbikes. And they have, like, you know, the women teachers have one motorbike guy who will take 2 of them, you know, back and forth from Canning all the way to Patankhali. And, you know, and what happens is that they don't teach the full time. As soon as it's 1 o'clock, they are trying to go back home. You know, I had my talk and nobody, like very few people could stay back because they had all rushed off by 2:30 to make it in time to go back home. And so a lot of the islanders are very unhappy and say, why doesn't the government make it a rule to only give jobs in the villages to people who live in the village? Because we have educated people here. They have to find work elsewhere. They are going to other villages. They are going to other places. Why can't there be a rule that, you know, at least a certain number of teachers are taken from the island, from that village, so that we can be ensured that they also stay here. They can give tuitions, they can help us with our letter writing, they can, you know, there are a lot of Sahitya Sammelans, you know, where everybody reads out their poetry and their, so they said, you know, these school teachers used to be part of that. And now the cultural life of the village is dead because they all run back. They all run away. They don't want to stay here. You know, what is it that they don't want to stay here? Who are we? And so there's this idea propagated that it's horrible to be living in a village. And, you know, and these school teachers, one can understand them too. They're like, my kid is going to an English medium school in the city. Why would I stay here? You know, I need to go back. So, you know, it is on the one hand understandable. But on the other hand, I think that there should really be a law saying that it should be within a radius of, you know, 10 kilometers that the teachers come. Because all through the world, teachers have been sort of the pillars of a village very often. But here they're not here, they go. So this is the state. Health, there are very few hospitals. Near where I did fieldwork, there was the Tagore Society for Rural Development, and wonderful doctor called Amitabh Chaudhuri who worked there for years and who ran that hospital. It is still running, but you know, and the ease with which a lot of people are conned into, you know, getting cesareans where they don't need, if they go to private places, which they do, in basically being told that they have cancer when they don't. You know, there's so much preying on the little people, on people who are not very connected or rich. And this I find, you know, really criminal, that there should be so much preying on these little people, you know. And the fact that in the end they lose out much more than us in everything. So, you know, even those who want to get educated, it's 3, 4, 5 times more difficult than for anybody in a city. People who want to get better, they will go to an OCHA, because if you don't have the serum against a snake bite, what do you do? So the situation is still very difficult, even though, there has been a lot of help from the government, especially given towards women, given towards widowed women, given towards elderly people, given towards women who are singers and performers. So there is a lot of praise for all these schemes, but there should really be more done in the rural areas and at the primary school level. The Chinese, they have got things right. Like they invested a lot more in primary education than they have. Whereas we in India, we invest in IITs, which is anyway the place where the middle class can come. So the 10%, euphemistically called middle class, but the 10% top of the population, right, who can go to these places, instead of really investing in primary education so that people can be educated and get the jobs, that other countries are getting. So anyway, do you have a question?
I would like to ask a question, Annu. This is during the COVID period when women in metropolises, were out of work, and there was a kind of 2 years of a hiatus from everything that you were doing. You were stuck at home. Our Indian Federation of University Women took up a project to make a survey of the mental health of women over the 2 years. And you raised this wonderful point, which really made me sort of make note of it, that of the mental health of women in the Sunderbans. Has anyone taken note of it, especially after 2 frequent Isla and the other big storm? Yeah, so it is absolutely devastating, with their home and heart completely wrecked. What would be the state of these women's health? The health, not physically, of mental health, their depression. Because I know, because I belong to a couple of NGOs that immediately set about fundraising for raising back homes. And I have known for sure that there are standing NGOs in the Sunderbans who actually thrive on these kind of misery and devastations, because they just put back the same old kind of homes, flimsy homes that are blown down by the wind and storm, instead of making strong cement and brick homes. They haven't learned their lessons from it. And we, staying in the city out of our compassion, are immediately ready to part with thousands of rupees to donate to these people who actually are not really getting any remedy. So for women, they bear the brunt of all the furies of nature. So, I wonder if any kind of mental health camps or anything of doctors doing and making a note of it is being undertaken. It would be very interesting. It's so sad, because we have been to the Sunderbans. We consider the Sunderbans as an outing, and we go for a couple of days there to a resort. But every time we go, we know we are entering a new unfamiliar world. It's not like even going to a hill station for a holiday. It's different. You feel the difference in being there. And I've asked people who live there in such precarious conditions, why do you live here? And they said, they touched the ground immediately and said, Eta amader ma, amar ma ke chede amra kothay jabo. So it is a kind of a bond between that precarious life and coming out of it. They're born there and they die there. No. So, Annu, have you made any note of what can be done to give them some sustenance, a strength to live and be strong also, no? They are strong people. Imagine, in spite of all these havocs caused on their life, they still live there. They don't vacate and migrate to the city in big numbers.
Thank you so much for this question and comment, Professor Gomati. This is so important, so basically, COVID started everybody was told to go back home. You know that the number of people killed by tigers in 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15 was around 4 to 5 per year. In 2020, it was 20 people.
My goodness.
Why? Because a lot of these migrant laborers had come back home with nothing.
Yes, because of the COVID.
Yes, so they basically, they were told to go back home, and a lot of them waited and spent all their savings just waiting, hoping things will get better. So by the time they came back, they had nothing. They have kids, screaming, hungry. They decided to return to the forest. A lot of them had no experience or had forgotten how to be. And basically, so 4 times more, 4 to 5 times more people were killed in 2020 and 2021. And also what happened in 2020 was Amphan hit. Okay. So as you were pointing out, a lot of people lost their houses. And, some of them are getting the money only now to build proper paka houses. And I agree with you. I also think that it should be brick houses so that people can, basically be in their houses when the cyclone hits, right? So it is a situation where even though a lot of the women are telling you that itamar ma, what I have noticed is that a lot of them are saying, okay, I might come back, but in the meantime, I need to make a living. I need to get my kids educated. And even if I have to go to Kerala or Chennai or whatever, I will do it because they will get a better education. I will get more money. I will, so it's very interesting to see. And for me, because I've been there going to that same village in the last 25 years, I've noticed that all my school teacher friends of 25 years ago, none of them have invested in the village. None of them have bought land there. None of them have any descendants living there. As soon as one can, as soon as one is slightly educated, they prefer living in hovels in the suburbs of Kolkata than in the Sundarban. Because, and a lot of NGO workers that claim to be from the Sundarban, if you ask them, because I know the place, so I'll tell them, okay, so you are from which village? So they'll tell me, Kumirmari or Bali, and I'll be like, oh, which school do your kids go to? And they'll be like, actually, they go to school in Shonarpur. We live in Shonarpur. So they will collect money for the Sundarban, claiming to have an NGO, but actually they will be living in Shonarpur or Mollikpur or Goria, which is these are the main places where people who have made it, who have a little bit of money, who have, some connections and some go and live. Okay. So this is why I was saying there should be a governmental decree saying that you can only be a school teacher in the Sundarban if you live there. If you live there.
Right.
So these are the ways in which, and a lot of women, you were pointing out, because a lot of women are going through a certain kind of mental trauma, because so the men have gone back to work. They, a lot of the time, when do they come back? They are, they have to work for the whole family. They are not sure that the money is coming, is it sent to the mother of the son, to the migrant laborer who is, working there? To what extent is the mother-in-law giving the woman some money so that, she can look after the family? There are all kinds of tensions, and this is why, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of shouting and annoyance, and therefore women saying, I am not putting up with this. I am off. I'm living now in, Kolkata. I prefer tea in somebody's house, but at least I will have my own money.
Yes.
And not be living, seriously, this domestic. So a lot of men also, when women work outside, after a few years, they get all suspicious. She has a smartphone. Who is she conversing with? There are all kinds of dalliances and alliances with Facebook friends and lovers and all of that. Okay, there's a whole ecosystem which is very interesting, where women have their own fun in their own way, like the men. There's no. But the thing is that there is still this thing of the men being suspicious and therefore hitting the wife for saying that I'm breaking down your cell phone and I'm disallowing you to work. So I knew a woman, somebody I know very well. She said, I left home. I left home. I said, fine. I will work again. Within 4 months, I'll buy a new cell phone. You know, I will continue working. And so it's very interesting because when she went back to the agency, because her husband had come and yelled at the agency, agent who had given her these 2-3 houses where she worked said, no, 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 I don't want any jhamela. You know, I told the husband that it's okay, take back your wife. And she was furious because she said, I don't want to go back to him because he is taking me back on condition that I will not work outside. And he has beaten me so much. And I prefer being known as without a husband, but getting my own work.
But Annu, at least they are protesting, these women.
Yeah.
With their level of education and experience, at least they're trying to sustain themselves on their own. That is creditable.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, it's been a
And
wonderful
I
listening
would
to
like to
young
say
girls not
something.
wanting to get
Didi,
married.
can I speak once
Yes,
before
yes.
I leave? It was very interesting listening to you. I travel a lot to Sunderbans because I'm a past district governor from Rotary, and in my area, I did a lot of work in Sunderbans, and many of the things that you have said are so familiar. The basic thing is that Sundarban, the whole place as it is like, it's like you can walk in and you can walk out. And all these continuous changes that are happening is not helping. But what you said, most of the people, when there are cyclones and all, the government has created a large number of shelters where I have gone, and I have even worked as a medical, person, in the sense that I would sit and explain to them which medicine to have, what to do, etc. So there are quite a few Rotary clubs in our zone, our area, which have started to adopt one village after the other, and they have done wonderful work. There are schools which are as good as a Kolkata school, where they've brought in their own teachers and things. So some ray of light is already coming in. So let's not be very, very, pessimistic about what's going on. It'll take time. And tomorrow happens to be Bagh Divas. Tomorrow is the day of the tiger. And there is one NGO called Sher. They work inside Sundarban a lot. And I think you know the name of the person, Joydeep Kundu. So he's organizing this Bagh Divas tomorrow in La Martiniere for girls. So I was just remembering the whole thing about the tigers, and we are scared of tigers, but I realized that actually tigers are not as scary as certain little insects. That's what I found out, because a small insect like a mosquito can kill more people than a tiger.
Yeah.
So the Bagh is a welcome thing. The Bono Bibi is neither Muslim nor Hindu, because both parts say that we are praying to Bono Bibi. We are Hindus, but we pray. And on the other side, my family comes from East Bengal. So there they have the Muslim version of it. So I didn't know about this Ma Kali being, put in place of Bono Bibi. But the Bono Bibi, the model of Bono Bibi has changed.
The image.
It used to be a white figurine with just a head and a face, and the Dokhinda Raja. That was the main thing about this Bono Bibi thing. So very interesting how, everything falls together, and then we start understanding where it all started and what has happened, and all this Amphan, Aila. I've gone through all of it because I'm the disaster chair for my district. So I know exactly what happened over there. Thank you so much for explaining everything to us so well. Beautifully done. Thank you.
Very, very enlightening, and it has taken into a distant land for the last 1 hour. So
Mhm.
Gomati, may I request you to propose the formal vote of thanks?
Thank you. Dear friends, I can see that many members from outside Calcutta have attended today's meeting, and I think Ranjana has been moving us to attend today's meeting from almost 3 weeks back. I mean, every day she was reminding us that today was the day that we should all be attending. On behalf of the Indian Federation of University Women's Association and Dr. Ranjana Banerjee, I am honored to place the vote of thanks at the end of today's wonderful talk, illuminating and also letting us know that there is a total change taking place in people there, and the outside world is beckoning them, because it remained as an isolated, as you say, there are so many islands. So Sunderbans always was, in inverted commas, a place which was different and uninhabitable, all the more because of the tiger. And so I thank you, Annu Jalais, for taking us through the lives of women and men who work there, precarious conditions of living and sustaining themselves. And I think those who live in the cities also should know that it is the Sunderbans that protects us from the fury of the Bay of Bengal. Otherwise, without the Sundarban and the mangrove forest, we would have been swept away long, long ago with the Isla and the Amphan. Thank you, and good evening and good night. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anu. Thanks for keeping in touch with me for the past 6 months. But it was wonderful hearing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank
for
you so
inviting
much.
me, and I enjoyed exchanging and
We
talking.
enjoyed too.
And I look forward to staying in touch with some of you. Please
Sure.
email me, and I look forward to visiting you and having.
There is one question I think which you haven't addressed, because there's somebody in the chat box who had said how many Royal Bengal Tigers are still existing in Sunderbans.
Oh, I
Oh
think it was
my
from Bhubaneswar.
Between 2 and 300.
No,
between
no, it
2
has
and
grown
300
in
between
numbers.
Bangladesh and West Bengal.
No, I belong to an organization that works with the Forest Department on the census of the tigers. The number of tigers in the Sundarbans have increased considerably
In the recent times.
in very recent times. Yes.
Yes.
Anu, I think with the permission of Dr. Ranjana Banerjee,
No, it's closed. No, Anu, it's closed.
I invite
So thank you,
to
Anu.
become a
We'll catch up
member
again.
of our club.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye-bye.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Annu. Thank you so much.
Thank you all and have a good
Bye.
evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good presentation.
Thank
Today
you.
Very
we had
good
a very good piece.
Very informative also.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You.
Bye.
Hi,
Hi.
Jayashree.
Good night. Good night.
Jayashree, wonderful having you over and your
Hi,
team.
Shamshri. How are you?
Yes, they will be very regular. The meetings now possibly. Yeah.
And I will talk to you tomorrow night.
Perfect. That will be nice.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Ranjana, can I close the meeting?
Close it. Close it.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Piravi.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care, Banika.